Hi, my name is Sokuzan, and I'm one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan so freely offers his love to us and his wisdom through these talks, and never asks us for anything in return. If you value what he does and what he is, and want them to continue, please visit our donate page at SokukoJi.org. Thank you.
This evening's Dharma talk is titled Produce the Vow. Produce. I want to produce something, produce that. Produce the vow. Before I talk a little bit about receiving and producing, which is what this talk title is referring to, how much we receive and how much we produce, I want to ask you to help us continue this. This seems valuable to you, which probably does. It wouldn't be here. Help us out if you can. Go to the website and the donate area there and do that, if you can. So produce. We're always producing all kinds of things, thoughts and emotions and opinions and judgments, and constantly planning things. So if you consider yourself a student of the Buddha's Dharma, whether you're studying this situation or in other ways, reading other books on the Dharma, so on, what's being recommended is that you produce the vow. Even if you haven't done this formally, the basic vow of the bodhisattva, or the enlightening being, as translated by Thomas Cleary, I believe, bodhisattva, one who is enlightening him or herself and others. How you do that, it would be up to you. Some people might do prostrations. Some might return to that in other ways. Look at a picture of the teacher. It's a possibility. I'm not requiring that of anyone. That's up to you. But you may need to do something, produce something, just like this evening, earlier today, we had Jukai ceremony. Kodo is a public name of the person formerly known as Yume. What did Yume mean?
Child.
Child? So now you've grown up. Good. Odo, huh? Something else? So Odo means ancient path. So totally appropriate for Odo. We're in a culture, we're in a situation where we have I had a Tibetan Lama or Tibetan Vajra master for a teacher whom I met in 1973 after spending 12 years reading about Buddhism. And then I had a Zen teacher, Zen master, whom I met in 1990. So we have kind of a hybrid situation, I guess you'd call it. So we're teaching, the way I talk about it is receive, sit down, hold still, look, observe, gaze at the wall and receive whatever shows up in the mind stream. Positive thoughts, negative thoughts, critical thoughts, judgments of others, judgments of yourself, strategies to do this or to do that or figure something out. All of this production. Need to receive all of that production without stopping it, without validating it, without doing anything to it. It is an awareness practice. It doesn't matter what you're aware of, but what you are aware of is a good thought, bad thought, whatever. Receive it. And then rather than produce more thoughts about this or about that, or make a lot of plans or strategies, as I said previously. Produce the vow. Remember the vow to be with all things. This is a powerful vow. A couple of ways this is stated is, I vow to be with all things. I vow to do good. I vow to not do harm. And you can mix that up in all kinds of different ways. And then the other one that is said quite often is I vow to save all beings. I vow to put others before myself. That's very difficult to do. And if you actually are doing that, you may not particularly feel like it. You might not feel like you're getting some kind of a credit. You may get tangled up in wanting other people to acknowledge that you're a helpful person rather than actually be helpful or be supportive to others. So in ancient times, there were stronger forms, countries where Buddhism goes back hundreds of years, if not thousands, and there are various practices, doing prostrations, there's something called the sevenfold Mahayana Puja. Puja means practice, and I don't even remember them, but one of them is prostration. Then they're making offerings to an altar where there are images of the Buddha. Just some way of using some kind of a form to help you or me or any of us to return and return and return, because it's not the mundane path of results. So when you do this, you won't necessarily, there isn't some kind of particular payoff to it. I'm not saying there wouldn't be some. Sit and face the wall for several hours a day. Pardon me. Eventually, you probably will calm down if you do this, especially this practice, but also other practices like Shine and Laktam, Shamatha Vipassana, resting in tranquility. Those also can be calming also. And I'm not here to find out which practice is the best, but you should find out which one that you want to do. So when I say produce the vow, I'm referring to a kind of production. We all want to produce something. That might be a good thing to produce. And that vow might be more towards an individual, it might be towards your teacher, might be towards your understanding of the precepts. It might be just simply trying to be with all things, trying to no more objecting to anything, no more agreeing with anything, and no more ignoring anything. You can start with your own mind stream. And that if you do start with your own mind stream, that same attitude of receiving starts to show up everywhere. So you produce the vow to be there, and then what you will notice that whatever shows up, wherever you have vowed to be, you won't disagree with it. You won't object to it. You won't agree with it, and you certainly won't ignore it. And if you do nothing with whatever's happening in front of you in your living room, at your kitchen table, and your neighbors across the back fence with your neighbor, or with someone in your workspace, you don't do anything with it, it becomes much more clear what is actually going on in any given situation. Not from the point of view of right or wrong, but from the understanding of the logistics or the mechanics of what is actually happening. You begin to see what other people's suffering. Someone that doesn't even know they're suffering because they cover it up so much with their blaming or with their opinions, their ideas, their logarithms of this or that, just prejudice. Someone is prejudiced, they really don't know they are. They know they are, then they aren't exactly prejudiced. They might be aware that they're shut down in some areas. Someone's actually prejudiced is not necessarily aware of it. They might even say, well, some of my best friends are those guys. I know I was raised by some people that, my mother and my stepfather, that talk that way. Not particularly comfortable, even when you're 10 years old, to hear that. So produce. You may need to actually do prostrations to an altar in a very formal situation. I would leave that up to you. I would say do that. Anybody that is talking to me that considers themselves a student of mine, we do it mutually. We talk about it. What would be helpful to you? And sometimes it's just might not be anything more than just bowing to an altar and sitting down. Might not even be bowing to an altar. It might be bowing to the wall and sitting down. That's up to you. How much do you need? Just like with, what was your name again? Huh?
Kodo?
No, Kodo. Actually, it's pronounced Kodo. Isn't that right, Mason?
Yes.
I mean, Takudo. Another kind of path. No. Path. So different with each person, and especially, as I said earlier, in our society, this particular practice that we're doing here, this isn't supported by anything other than you and the people that are here. We don't have a cultural situation where everyone, all the 600 or 700 families are all supporting this monastery. In the Tibetan tradition, it's kind of understood, and I don't know what it was like in ancient times, hundreds of years ago. It's kind of understood if you're studying in that tradition, then you may do 100,000 prostrations at the same time, reciting the name, or using the refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha, and refuge in the teacher or the guru. You might say that over and over and over again, and prostration, and counting the prostrations on a mala. And there's several other, those are called nundro practices or foundation practices, where you do those, then you do 100,000 bodhisattva mantras, then you do 100,000 offerings to the mandala by actually creating the universe with handful of rice. And you go through a whole repetition, and every time you create everything, and as soon as you create it, then you offer it, saying various incantations, I guess you'd call it, offering everything. So you create it, and then you offer it. You create it, you offer it. Creation, completion, creation, completion. This also happens with the Guru Yoga, where you, depends on the lineage, depends on the teacher, you do 1,000,000. Count them. You count them on a mala. Offering. So you're producing, along with all of the other complicated and not only mantras, but just the liturgy itself is quite involved. Sometimes taking hours and hours to do that. You can't just cram it into 15 minutes. At least not the one that I was practicing in the Kagyu tradition under Trungpa Rinpoche. Very time-consuming stuff. And there's no guarantee that just because you do all of that you're going to attain realization or enlightenment. You might just fill up your time with a lot of activity. So you might have to look at if you're serious about this and sincere and want to practice this awareness practice, you might have to understand what do you personally need to do rather than one size fits all. That's not going to work. You need to decide. Take some questions around that. Might be good to, if you have questions, please ask. I'll try to respond in a helpful way.
Sokuzan, how does a student see for themselves what they need to do and what they don't?
But there again, it varies. Depends on who it is, what they're doing, maybe even how old they are, how much practice they're currently doing, sitting meditation. There's just so many variables there. I would say it's to be individual. I think it's important to have a teacher. I'm not here to promote myself, but I'm saying it might be necessary to have someone that you have some confidence in that can help you on the path. Well,
Shobhai, if someone's functioning as a student, should that, whatever they need to do, always happen mutually with the teacher?
I think more so in our culture, maybe than, say, in ancient Japan or China or India, someplace where there was a strong cultural support. Maybe not right at first, the first few hundred years, but eventually it became very strong, and the forms and the traditions were very powerful, and you just did what you were told. Whereas in our culture, it's much different, quite a bit different. We have people are extremely knowledgeable about so many things. Right now, you can go on Wikipedia and ask just about any kind of a question, and it's going to give you, it may not be the correct response, but you can find out anything, basically, at least some kind of information about, say, for instance, asking about Buddhism or the Buddhist path or how that shows up, even though in the Tibetan lineages, a lot of that is considered to be secret teachings. They don't tell everyone what it is, but everything is available. But then it kind of warns you, don't practice and do this, and it'll tell you the whole thing. But don't do that without the guidance of a lama. It's like, here's how it's done. Here's what you do. But you need to have a lama tell you about it. So I'm not sure what they're up to there, basically. Probably some kind of magnetizing you into it, and also letting you know that you won't be able to practice this without having the imprimatur or the abhisheka of giving you permission to do this particular tantric practice, including the nundro practice or the preliminary practices.
Onabine, if you have a daily practice, can it become too habitual? What do you look for in terms of
too habitual?
You do it every day, month after month, year after year. Is there?
You're asking if there's a downside to that? Well, there could be. There again, it's situational and it's individual, but repetitive. It's necessary to repeat this kind of a practice, the awareness practice, studying the Dharma, discussing the Dharma with Sangha, with community. Interacting with the teacher as much as possible. I mean, everything else is distracting us. As soon as you watch television or tune into any of the news channels or any of the insanity that's going on all over the world, pretty crazy.
Divine. So if you're saying the vows every day, and sometimes it's meaningless, sometimes it's meaningful, sometimes it's difficult to get to do it.
Yes. It's called practice. Sometimes it goes along, and sometimes you get going, and then other times it's disappointing or you don't feel so good about it.
Quick follow-up question.
Okay. Did you have something around that since you suggested the talk title? Based on something I said.
When you're vowing, I thought I had it from a previous talk, but it must have been a book study or something.
Right.
What caught my attention was you want to produce something, produce the vow every day. And is producing in that way something that we can conjure up
It seems like it. Just a matter of just do it, rather than, because it's not a mundane path of doing something so you get something. It's a spiritual path of doing something because it is the intention to do this, the intention to see what this is. So we have a form, which is sitting practice of meditation, and we have some reference points, like an altar, an image of someone who sat still and saw the truth and began to teach. It became a spiritual path. And you could say, sometimes they say, well, Buddhism really isn't a religion. Well, you might say it's a spiritual path, but it's not the way theistic religions have some kind of a goal, some kind of promise. Buddhism also has a goal, is to see the truth, to see what is fundamentally true, to become aware, become enlightened. So there's a lot of teachings like that. But your personal path to that is just that. It's not just believing in things, it's doing it with your mind. Not easy to do that. But you might need to produce some kind of a structure. You might need to have a place to sit. You might produce something in the sense of getting your lazy butt over the cushion and watch what is happening with your mind, instead of, can't do this right now, I need to go to the post office, I need to do this, need to do that. We all know what that's like. If you do any kind of meditation practice at all, it's much easier just to do other stuff and then put that off till later. But
You're bowing. So you say that you met your teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, only 4 times? No.
I had 4 face-to-face interviews with him, maybe 15, 20 minutes apiece.
So what was it about what he said to you that had you continue to practice even without seeing him every day or even every year?
I don't know if I can explain it other than meeting him helped me see that there was a possibility of working with my own personal insanity in such a way that maybe I could understand it more deeply, maybe overcome it, but at least get some kind of clarity around it. Just reading Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism very much magnetized me into studying with him, driving to finding out where he was and driving to Chicago to meet him. Something else you're looking for?
And you're bowing, you sometimes say that you're lazy.
I am.
But you're also stubborn. So was it the stubbornness that became maybe the motivation to keep going?
I think something like that.
So how can you be lazy but stubborn?
I don't know. Maybe I don't feel like doing stuff, but I do it anyway. So I'm lazy because I don't feel like doing it. I want to do it. If I can get out of it, I will. But I couldn't get out of that. It's like, it's very much, it reminds me of what Suzuki Roshi says in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. If somebody's watching you, you can hide from them. But if nobody's watching you, you can't hide from yourself. Just something about the sitting practice of meditation, the awareness is able to see more clearly what is happening in the mind stream in terms of being habituated to certain kinds of patterns that you could call laziness.
When you're bowing, so in terms of producing the vow, if we're experiencing negative emotions that seem to have really consumed us, is that a time to produce the vow?
Maybe a time to just watch, just observe how the emotions are dragging you this way or that way, or how you're shutting down because you don't want to feel like that. And it also may be a time where you go and do sitting practice, observing the wall, just receiving what shows up. And you look at a wall, nothing's happening. The mind stream continues to rotate more than likely. So watching that to see the nature of the way the mind shuts down through aggression or shuts down through thinking or elaborating or passion, or shuts down through just blocking out or distracting yourself from something else. Observing that. You do prostrations. What does that feel like to you?
It varies.
Okay.
Feels like an offering. Other times it feels like a habit.
What's the difference between?
I don't know if there is one.
Sensu bowing. Is stubbornness necessary to awaken?
I don't know. I would say that necessarily. I'm saying that's what I seem to have, that kind of a quality of stubbornness and planting my feet, getting tired of being lazy, or of not being able to go in and do something that I'm not getting any results from. But I've been told by my teacher I should do it anyway. So I just do it anyway. It's been going on for a long time. Other people may operate in a different way. They may be not so much stubbornness, but just the intention to just return to the vow, return to the vow, return to the vow to be with all things. No more warfare. Even though warfare comes up, just return to that vow. I vow to be with all things. I received a vow. I'm observing a vow to be with all things. And I'm going to do that, even though right now it doesn't look like I'm doing so good. That may arise. You might be taking some kind of inventory with yourself where you don't feel like you're living up to that vow, or you're not keeping the vow. So all kinds of things like that can occur. Let me put it this way. The problem with a true spiritual path, and I'm happy to talk about this more if you have more questions, is there's no result. And you actually begin to transcend a relative truth as you practice. That doesn't mean you switch into some other kind of gear where suddenly you're kind of crazy. You're doing things with no understanding about what cliff you're about to jump off from. It just means that you have begun to understand the relative truth is only true relatively. And who you are goes way beyond that. Your actual identity it's been said lots of different ways. The one that I often say is your identity is like the sky. It doesn't come or go, but everything that comes and goes in it, the clouds, those are the ones that make it look like we have some kind of relative value or lack value, or we're getting somewhere, or we're not getting somewhere. The sky doesn't do anything. It just receives the clouds. But it's done with the awareness rather than with the thinking process, which is kind of attached and hooked on right and wrong, success and failure.
Shodo bowing, how does producing the vow help with our fixation on the clouds in the sky? Bowing?
I think it simplifies it so that you just return to that vow, and you may prostrate, you may bow, you may just offer incense to an altar where there are reminders of the Buddha's teaching, like an image of the Buddha. So as you know, we don't worship this. This is a reminder of what we're here to do, and it's a reminder of the teachings that goes back 2,500 years, just like the Kechamyaku that was given to, what's your name again?
No.
Huh?
No.
Yeah. Pretty good memory. I really couldn't remember what I named him. You believe that? Why are you so quick to shake your head yes? course I remember. Kodo. What does it mean?
Ancient path.
Ancient path. What was I going to say? I did forget that. So we need some kind of a touchstone. We need, and it's, you get it, you can get it from the teacher, your name. Or you can get it from the Kechimaku or the bloodline, if you open that up, which Kodo has a bloodline that has the Dharma names in this lineage going back to the time of the Buddha. And sometimes I say, we don't know if that's exactly that person at this time, but it doesn't matter. It's just the idea of lineage. We come as close as we can with individual names through the Indian tradition, through the Japanese or Chinese tradition and the Japanese tradition, up to here we are in the West, in the United States. And so it's just a way of acknowledging the form and acknowledging the lineage, acknowledging the ancestors that have been connected with the Buddha and have been teaching this cumulative tradition, not a revealed tradition as it is with some theistic paths where some great being has come down and helped us out. The Buddha was a man who understood something and shared it with others, taught others.
Can producing the vow be something relative, like just giving a Sangha member a hand with something?
Somewhat, but there seems to be, just like walking in the woods could be very meditative, but it's not shikantaza. So you might have to have an actual form, or you do that, or you bow before an altar. I'm not saying you have to do 100,000 prostrations necessarily, but some kind of offering seems necessary to give something, to produce something. I'm going to do this. I'm going to practice this no matter what. I'm not going to be stopped by anything, including the lack of so-called relative success. It's difficult because we want results. We spend a lot of time meditating, a lot of time in retreat, studying the Dharma. We want some kind of result. Yes.
Shiva bowing. Living here, we do the chants every morning.
Yeah.
Are the prostrations, the incense, and the chants that we do, is that already included in that vow, or is that producing the vow?
That's why we do it, so that you can come in and just, if you live at this monastery, and then you are involved in all of those both forms where we're producing the sutras, chanting the sutra. You can do that on your own or not. How many hours do we spend chanting if you live here? Anybody ever added it up? Quite a bit. I mean, it's not all day long, but it's quite a bit. Not too long ago, for in the memorial service for Kobun, 20-year, who passed away 20 years ago, we chanted, I think, 11 straight hours. What is that about? It's producing just an acknowledgement of, it certainly was an acknowledgement for me of how powerful his teaching was for me. And his teaching was very simple for me. All he did was basically point out my self-deception. Took me a long time to see what he was pointing at. Over a decade. Be really clear on it. And that all the time I was practicing, after I met him, I spent a lot of time meditating and trying to understand what it was I was missing and what my relationship to him was for a long time.
Shabbat, did Kobun or Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche have that quality of stubbornness that you're talking about?
I don't know. I didn't know them personally that well. If either one of them, maybe Trungpa Rinpoche might have had that quality, and I don't know about Kobun. Takodo, do you think Kobun was stubborn? It's more like a feather. But that's the image I've used before. He's a feather that could turn into a sword in a moment. But it was situational. He didn't run around acting all full of himself.
We're talking about how much we spend time chanting and producing sometimes. If situationally we feel like we're doing more of that than getting to the cushion, can there be an imbalance the other way?
Probably. That would be your situation. You could talk to the teacher, you could talk to the people in the Sangha. You're practicing, you're not living in the monastery, but you're here every day, just about, as far as I know. So I think it's situational. The most important of the practices, and the one that's very difficult to do for any length of time, is shikantaza, sitting meditation, because it's just a formless practice. There's not much of a support there. The only really support is just sitting, holding still, and just your body awareness, just being there and being present. And then watching the discursive mind go this way and go that way without doing anything with it. More. Yeah. I'm feeling a little weak. Does it look like it? But I don't have to leave, so you can help me out by asking questions if you want. If you want to continue, if you don't, we can close. But ask questions, and I'll get all the energy I need to respond. Yes.
Shavang, I'm curious about that area of stubbornness. It seems like with listening to you that what are ways that producing the vow can show up that may look like something other than stubbornness?
I don't know. Thank you for the question, but I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm not sure how I can respond. I'm not sure what is it you want to know. I mean, I know you just asked me the question, so obviously you'd like a response to that. But is there something more that you can say about it?
Shavang, are there other qualities besides stubbornness that?
It's persistence, a sincerity, just wanting to see what is true yourself, and having, in my case, having a teacher tell me in the midst of all my fear and difficulty, telling me I can do this, I can see it, I can do it. And having somebody that you had a great deal of respect and admiration for because of his ability to just read Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. That book was incredibly powerful to me in 1973 when I first read it. Just realizing that somebody really understands through the Buddhist teaching how the mind works. Because I could see that what he was describing was the way my mind was working in terms of the three poisons and all of the teachings in that amazing book. Anybody on Zoom have a question?
Kevin Bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
In the repetitiveness of forms, I'm thinking particularly when we were doing the chanting for Kobun's Parinirvana, there would be periods where I felt intense squirreliness and wanting to jump out of my skin. What is it about the form that can create that kind of squirreliness, bowing?
Probably just the repetition of it, saying the ego mind, the self-centered mind wants some kind of entertainment or something that seems valuable or something. And when we just take something and just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, then we're tying up the whole construct that we would call body, speech, and mind into a form. And if you say something over and over and over and over again, the mind that is able to daydream might still be able to daydream, but it's not quite as comfortable because it's tied to that, whatever that mantra or that, in that case, it was, I think it was the Heart Sutra in Japanese and in English, and also the Daishin Dharani, also a lot of Japanese words that, even though they're interesting, after a while they can become tedious somewhat, possibly. And so it's just a matter of continuing to repeat that. It's kind of, it's like we're actually being shown that we're looking for entertainment. We're not getting it. We're getting some kind of tedium. But that has to do with the consciousness, not to do with the mantra itself, or the, for that matter, the meaning of the words. I'm sorry, I can't read there's a question there, but I can't read it from where I'm at.
Kevin bowing. Balak says the repetitive practice that you were talking about seems to be counter to form. The great treatise, the view or method of the Ho Shang, this is a reference to the opinion that all effort, all mental activity, and discursive intellection and all conceptualization, indeed anything that is not entirely natural and spontaneous, is nothing but an obstacle to spiritual understanding. Would you comment your take on that?
I don't comment on or have takes on anything. I appreciate your comments, but I work from questions. I understand what you're saying there. It sounds like you have a pretty profound and conceptual understanding of that, but I'm not that smart. So if you want to take what you're asking and give me a straightforward question, I will respond to it. Can you do that? I think he's typing something in. We'll see. Looks like it.
The
Okay.
question, Kevin bowing, is thinking bad when trying to meditate, bowing?
No, you can't meditate unless you think. Because if you stop thinking, then you're not meditating. You're in some kind of a neutral state. There's some kind of a state where you're either sound asleep or you're isolating yourself in terms of your consciousness. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of controversy and so on about the jhana states. And I'm not here to go for right and wrong, but I am saying that you need to observe my experience. I have a little bit of experience, is you need to watch the thoughts come and go. Watch the thoughts come and go. So eventually you see that there's no one producing those. There's no way you can think or I can think. Everything is dependently arisen. Like I can't say what I'm saying right now unless you've said something and asked something. So it's dependently arisen. I'm not being particularly simplistic about it, although it may look like that. It's not, and it's also not that you can't do something totally on your own, write poetry or write prose or create music. Of course you can, but it's still dependent on everything that's happened to you in this life and probably even other lives. So you don't have to stop thinking or change it or change gears to do anything else. You need to do it with the awareness. There may be a lot of thinking, and your particular style or mine or anyone else's may not be very much thinking. I sometimes say I don't think very much. I think some, but not as much as I did a few years ago. Okay, another comment from Balak. Could someone read, Kevin?
Kevin bowing. Balak says, indeed, meditation is the empty state. Yes, you're right, but I meditate to emptiness, bowing.
Okay, well, that's whatever works for you. I'm not here to change anybody's approach to it or convince you that you should do something other than what you're already doing. That would be up to you. Yes, sir.
SokukoJi, what does a question open up for you that a request for a comment doesn't, Bowing?
Well, the request for a comment is, it needs to be a question so that I can respond to the question. If it's a request for a comment, then it's more like a conversation. And I might have conversations, but I'm not going to have them up here. I have to function this way. And I have to function this way, but you don't have to be here. Well, in your case, you might have to, if you've made a commitment to do it. But there's no requirement. So, you follow me a little bit? I'm functioning as a Dharma teacher, not functioning as someone that sits around at the kitchen table and discusses the Dharma. I don't do much of that anymore. I did it one time, years ago. Good question. More about that?
John, bowing.
Yes.
I have a question about just pertaining to today's ceremony.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of ordination?
Okay, thank you. So as I understand it, it's we're inspired possibly by a teacher or by something the Buddha said or something that Wei said or Dogen said or Vasubandhu or any other teacher or teaching and teachings where we don't even know the author, like the Prajnaparamita literature, which is quite extensive. We listen or we hear something, we hear someone say something, could be the Buddha, could be a lineage holder from another 1,000 years later. And we're inspired by that. And then we might meet a teacher or begin to meditate under the guidance of this person or that person. Maybe they're a teacher, maybe they're not. Maybe you read a book on it. These days, there's all kinds of instructions. And then if we feel a strong connection, especially to a teacher or to a particular lineage, then we might see how difficult it is to pursue or to work on that. And there's not a lot of results forthcoming on the spiritual path. This is the book that my teacher, compilation of his talks, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. What is spiritual materialism? It's using spiritual techniques, ideas, and practices to get somewhere, to accomplish something or function in a materialistic way, as if it were something you can accomplish in that way. And so the cutting through part is to see the truth there, to do it with the awareness. So coming back to your question, it's very difficult to do that. So one of the structures that has been set up since the time of the Buddha and even before is to study under a teacher. You might receive vows. The vow in Buddhism is refuge in the Buddha. You leave or you go away from the mundane idea of getting somewhere, accomplishing the 8 worldly dharmas, and you change gears over to seeing what this is, what is fundamentally happening with the guidance of the Buddha, who's no longer at war with anything, and the support of what he taught. Everything is dependent and arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as an individual situation or thing or entity or being or dynamic. And refuge in the Sangha are the community of people, as we have here, who are endeavoring to study under a particular teacher some aspect or several aspects of the Buddha's Dharma as that teacher understands it, based on probably working on it for a long time. So the idea with a vow is you tie yourself to the teacher, you tie yourself to the Buddha's Dharma, refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha, and then the 16 precepts, which you can see online on our website. They're available there. You can see a vow to do good, a vow not to do harm, and a vow to be with all things, which is basically the bodhisattva vow. And then the 10 prohibitory precepts, which are meant to be observed, not obeyed. So you do this formally with a preceptor, and then you just did you see the ceremony, John? No. So the ceremony is very simple, very direct, straightforward, and the person, if someone asks me for jukai or lay precepts, not full ordination as a monk, but then depends on who they are. I might say, okay, you've thought about this for a while. In this case, Kodo had thought about this for, 20 years? Yeah. Thought about it for a long time. He's never mentioned precepts to me until about, several months ago? Yeah, and said, I think it might be a good idea if I receive vows from you. And I think I said something like, what? I mean, we've known each other longer than, not longer than Unyo and I, but longer than just, I think, everybody here, other than maybe Mason, or Takudo, I should say, which is his Dharma name. So it's the image I use is like glue. So you might think about it yourself for a few years, which you're invited to study the precepts and see. And if I never hear from you again, then I assume you probably don't want to do that. But if you come back and say, I think I really need to do this, I want to do this. So, and everyone is so different. I've had people sew a whole raksu like this under the guidance of either Unyo or Shoka or other sewing teacher, and then get right down to the end and just they can't do it. And the next thing we have is a raksu that's blank. There's no name written on it, and it just sits on a shelf somewhere. Not very often, because usually if they're unsure of themselves, it just won't happen. But it's a way of receiving this vow to you're vowing to attain realization of a Buddha. And this may or may not occur, but it's not about whether it occurs or not. It's about the intention. It's about the vow. Further question, John?
No, thank you, bowing.
Yes, sir. Is there a final question? I don't want a final question from you.
Oh, Michelle bowing.
Who said that? Wait a minute. I'll tell you what, Michelle. I'll respond to Shoda first, because this is going to be a snap. I can respond to his with no, but yours are a lot more convoluted and circular. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah, that's actually a compliment. Yeah, and I don't compliment very much, but you have a compliment. Go ahead, Shodo.
Shodo bowing. The earlier question was bringing up for me, I think it was Bodhidharma responded once saying that the mind essentially was empty and serene. I'm wondering if that's different than a mind without thoughts. Bowing.
So I don't really say so much about a mind without thoughts. I just say that you don't believe the thought. So that doesn't, if you don't believe them, you don't disbelieve them and you don't ignore them. It doesn't matter if you're thinking or not. There isn't anyone that thinks anyway. There is no thinker. So the thoughts come along and might try to capture some aspect of consciousness that, and it's not that it doesn't have some success, but not much. But
sure, bowing. So can we have an empty mind that's full of thoughts?
Yeah. It's just like Netflix is full of empty stuff, but we watch it. Why do we do that? All of that is invented. Oh, you don't watch Netflix? You do, yeah. But it's all made up. But we're quite fascinated by that when somebody makes up a bunch of stuff and then somebody else comes along and acts that out. Or we're just fascinated by it. I know I am. I love movies. More? Okay, Michelle, you're on.
Michelle bowing. Do you rely on a vow? Do you?
Yes. Yes. At the risk of sounding pompous. I don't really care if I sound pompous. I am that vow. I don't rely on anything. I am that vow. I'd be dead if I lived any other way than this vow. When I say I am, I'm not saying there's some kind of weird hocus pocus going on. I couldn't live without it. I wouldn't live. I won't live without it. But it's not a fancy kind of a glowing, wonderful, I'm so dedicated to saving all beings. I'm also dedicated to knocking you on your ass, if that's what's necessary, in order for me to do what? What you've asked me to do is train your mind, help you train your mind. Have I hit anybody yet? Have I? No. So far, I haven't had to hit anybody. Scary enough as it is. What I'm saying by that is I'm not going to hurt anybody or hit anybody. Of course not. I'm not in ancient India or Tibet, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm saying sometimes it can get difficult when you're relating to somebody who you've asked to function as your teacher, and yet you're only willing to accept some of what that person says. Probably is not your teacher. If you're picking and choosing what the teacher is pointing at and feeling like some of what the teacher says is pretty good, but the rest of the stuff is something you don't, you kind of disagree with it. Further question? Michelle?
You did answer it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I see Pao Chan's got his head shaking like, yeah, so he's kind of giving me the go-ahead to close up shop. I can almost tell what time it is by looking at Pao Chan.
I don't even know where it was.
Yeah, well, you don't need to. No. Anybody from Australia, they don't have watches down there. Okay, we can hate the merit and do other more important things.